And welcome to this episode of Mind the Gap, making education work across the globe. The first episode of 2023 with me, Tom Sherrington, and my great partner, Emma Turner. Hello, Emma.
Hello, Tom. Are you well?
Yes, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. And what do I start with? Not one guest, but two.
We are. And we're recording this before Christmas, and we're going to pretend it's the new year because that's the way this stuff goes. So we're really delighted to welcome the kind of education's data wizards, James/Jamie Pembroke and Richard Selfridge. Hello, welcome.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Emma. Thanks for inviting us on.
No, we're really looking forward to talking to you. In fact, we have a lot in common. So one of them is that we're podcasters. So you've done this, been doing this podcast. So you were sort of on the other side of the microphone this time. Are you happy with this? Are you comfortable being on interviews rather than doing the talking?
I feel quite nervous.
But honestly, once you realise how chaotic we are, you'll relax.
Exactly, because obviously we run our podcast, which is the Data Busters, and so I'm used to controlling these things and running things and just basically sort things out, give Jamie the pitch and let him hit the ball.
Well, or you throw the stick and I'd run after it. It was like we go barking off into the distance.
No, I think you've got a good rapport, and people should listen to that Data Busters. It's brilliant. We'll talk about that a bit later on. And also, this is something that. Am I right thinking that you both have daughters called Martha?
Yes.
We do indeed, exactly. I think they're about 3 years apart.
And that
Jamie's
is great,
is older than mine, but yes, we do.
My daughter's middle name. My daughter's middle name is also Martha. So this is an amazing meeting of Marthas here.
Well, I should have brought her in.
Now I feel like I'm out of the Martha party. This is terrible.
Fathers of Marthas.
I'm actually sitting amongst Martha's stuff at the moment, surrounded by language, German and Russian and all sorts. So,
it's good. It's exciting. Well, I mean, Emma and I are huge fans, and we both. Emma can show. Mine is on my Kindle, which I recently have downloaded onto this. Look at that. It's an epic book. We're showing for people who are listening. Data proof your school. How to use assessment data effectively, and it's like. I mean, there's so much to talk to you about, and I know recently you've done a brilliant podcast which is aimed at governors. But I know who wants to kick off first, because I'm really interested in this. How have you come together as a partnership? How do you know each other? And how did you find that sort of mutual love of data? Let's kick off with James. Let's hear your take on that.
Okay. Well, I really love this because the reason why I got or Richard and I found us each other. Was because I was warned about Richard by an organisation who deal with data, and they said, "Oh, you've got to be really careful about that guy. Watch out for that guy." And they were quite serious, and I'm thinking, "Oh, I've got to get to know this guy because he's like rubbing people up the wrong way." So I think it was probably a couple of years after that this figure, this person that I'd heard, this legend that I'd heard about that was, causing some ripples and waves. I don't know if you got in touch with me or if I got in touch with you, but, we found each other.
I think we kind of, our paths crossed because we come from two different directions. So I'm a primary school teacher, so I was deep in the mire of English education in the 2010s when as what Becky Allen calls the data wave rolled across school, which I know that you've worked on as well, Tom. But we all kind of dealt with that. But from school's perspective, I was looking at things that people were saying and thinking, wait a second, some of this stuff just doesn't make sense. So I was coming from a school's point of view. Jamie, you were coming from a data analyst point of view, and you were having similar thoughts to say, actually, some of these things don't quite make sense. So and there were a lot of people kind of around, this is sort of in 2014, 15, where we were all beginning to say, we don't think that these assumptions that people are making are warranted. We don't think they're reasonable. So we kind of came together through that. I suspect the first time we probably met each other, Jamie, was when we went to go and see Ofsted and had a chat with them.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, we went to meet up with Sean Harford and some statisticians. And I was shocked when we asked some questions about the way things were measured. And I think I said, I think it's inappropriate that it's done in this particular way. And the statistician in the room said, not only is it inappropriate, but it's wrong. And, and it really took the wind out of my sails. They're like, we've come to you to say, whoa, you shouldn't do these things. We don't. And you're telling us that it's wrong. And I think he said, oh, yeah, I've got a far better method of doing this, but they just basically won't let me. Oh, okay. They're still doing that same thing. Much to Richard's annoyance and mine, but I know that there's some of the sort of the methodology behind some of these measures that we've been banging on for quite a long time. It's yeah, you go, what are you doing? You know, we sort of pigeonhole schools. I mean, secondary progress 8, I think, does it get to the point where 60% of schools were their scores were statistically significant? So about 30%, about 30% was significantly below, and 30% was significantly above. 40% were kind of in line. That makes no sense at all. Shouldn't it be a small percentage that are significant?
But it's good that you kind
like,
of
bites.
You're kind of, you know, you in a way, and then lots of stuff has changed since then, and the whole thing of, like, you know, in the UK we used to have levels, you know, and that's just was taken away. But then it kind of created this vacuum of people then making stuff up, and then there's a whole wave of sort of bursting the nonsense that people have invented instead. So you've been, I mean, you're the voices on Twitter and other places where you're the kind of the voices of reason, and like keep bursting those bubbles because people still are kind of making stuff up. But it's interesting that you have this sort of primary secondary thing. So Emma, how did you first hit upon these wizards of data?
Well, I had a look at it because my co-head colleague and I were known at one point as the sock ironers, because our level of attention to detail was ridiculous in school. So when I saw this title of Data Proof Your School, I was like, ooh, this is right up my street. So I had a look at it, and the first thing that jumped out at me, it was not necessarily like an explanation of everything. It was the bit where you said, has your school got a viable data strategy? And I thought, I've never heard that phrase before, as in actually having a strategy for what you're going to do with the data. So being proactive about how you use it rather than reactive in how you're meant to be presenting it to some external person. So the thing I'm really interested in, first of all, is for people who haven't heard that phrase before, or haven't read the book, is for you to kind of expand upon what you mean by this viable data strategy, because that was the first bit that made me go, ooh.
I think it's something which certainly I've been working with for quite some time. If we go very quickly back to, I say, in 2014-15, when we were saying that people were doing things that didn't make sense, there was quite a lot of resistance because people were very entrenched in the systems they were using. Good news now is that most people have begun to realize actually what we were doing wasn't particularly reasonable, and because things have changed in the UK, well, in England particularly, in terms of the regulatory framework, it's helped. So now people are saying, well, what should we do? And again, the more that Jamie and I talked about it, the more that we looked at things, the more that I worked with MATs and with schools, you realize that actually schools have a very policy-based framework. Certainly in England, there's a lot of policies. If you talk to the average school, ask them, how many policies have you got? And it's, you know, it's tens of policies. People are into 50 or 60 policies. But data underpins quite a lot of, or assessment or information underpins a lot of what you do. So rather than thinking about having a data policy or an assessment policy, it makes much more sense to say, well, actually, what's our strategic use of data? How are we trying to develop the information which we gather, which we collate, which we analyze, and then we do something with? So it's that thinking about the information which you have, the data which you have, strategically, so that you can develop it, so that over time it becomes higher quality, and your collection of it is much more efficient, so that you can spend more time on the things that you actually want to be spending time on, which is focusing on, you know, curriculum and helping children who need support.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to come in there. I think that schools were coming at this from in a very different world, sort of a different time with a very different purpose. That the purpose of data was not really to tell them anything useful. The purpose of the data was to keep the wolf from the door. That's why schools generated data, because someone was going to show up, an Ofsted inspector, an LA advisor, some consultant. And so you needed something to show them that make them happy, and then they will go away. And I've sort of done this sort of joke where I've sort of like, you prepare your made up data, and then the person comes and they knock on the door and say, hi, hello, Mr. Mrs. Head teacher, do you have your made up data for me? You go, yes, here's my made up data. And they look at you and say, yes, your made up data all appears to be in order. I'll see you again next year. And you go, yay. and that was it. So when you talk to heads now and you say, do you remember that when we all thought that a 2B plus or a 4B minus was an actual thing? And they all go, ho, 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 ho. Yeah, but you're still doing it though, aren't you? And lots of schools are still doing it.
It's amazing how that was so strong. I mean, I remember when I was in Essex as a head in 2008, 9, 10, 11. And I remember this head making a brilliant joke. Well, I mean, it's a data joke. So how funny can that be? But she was saying, I'm really proud of my school because you can walk up to any child in the playground, the Key Stage 3, and say, what level am I working at? And they can say 5C. Yeah. See, the problem is they always say 5C because they've learned that, because that's all they know to say. And then they know, and then you say to them, and what are you aiming for? And they'll say 5B. And
by
none
the end of the year,
the person knows what that means in terms of like maths or writing or art or anything. It's just the next one up, and that's not the world we are in. But do you still feel that thinking is still sort of there, but it's just called something else then?
Yeah, it's called something else. One of my favorite stories was you've probably heard of Ed Finch. Ed Finch is quite a popular guy on Twitter, and he told me a few years ago that when he was a young teacher, he got to that point in his first year where he had to put some data into the tracking system or the sim system or the spreadsheet or whatever. And he was quite nervous about this and he didn't really know what to do. And his mentor sort of said, don't worry about it, Ed, just do what we all do. And he said, well, what do you mean? We just add 2. Because all children, they follow the path. That's the path. So you say 5C, 5C plus, 5B, 5B plus, whatever that's. And now, well, not now, in the out of the ashes of levels arose these systems that were even worse. And they still followed these gradients. And now, I think only now we're getting to the point where the majority of schools are not doing that. And they're literally just in primary, they're just saying, do they get it or not? Yeah. Or maybe they really get it, or they kind of get it, or they don't really get it. So maybe there's like a 3-way split, but those level things, they're still there, but they're kind of fading a bit now, thankfully. It's taking time.
I love the bit in the book, where you talk about the fact that the nonsense of the 3 points in the year, that their progress happens incrementally, a third of it by Christmas and a third of it by spring, and then a third of it by summer. And you just think, when you write it down and when you read it in your book, you just think that is so obvious, yet such a complete nonsense that everybody is subscribing to. So I absolutely love it's the most readable data book I've ever read because they made me laugh all the way through.
Richard's first book is full of equations, isn't it, Richard? So
so the first book which I wrote, which is called Data Busting for Schools, basically is a stop using statistical significance, because it was all used in RAISE reports in England and they just didn't make any sense. So that had a load of maths in it. Whereas this, and when that came out, lots of people said, this is really interesting. It's really interesting, but I haven't got time. Just tell us what to do. So Data Proof Your School is a how-to, and it's a very clear how-to. And in it, we were just like, okay, actually, we just need to say, stop doing these things that just don't make sense. All of that kind of legacy that we had in particularly in England, but across the UK, and lots of countries have dealt with it, where because you can measure stuff, because you can stick it into a computer, and because of the rising of computer power, people started collecting data that was really low quality and it didn't make much sense at all, and then putting it in and making all kinds of weird assumptions about it. So we've kind of said, no, stop doing that. Just these things, they just don't make sense. And it's a shame because things like levels, as I've said many times, levels was a really sensible plan when it was introduced. It was introduced. Dylan William, who lots of people have heard of, was instrumental in introducing the level system across the UK, the English system, when the national curriculum came in. The idea was that the individual pupils would have a sense of progression as they moved through school. You'd come in and you'd start at level 1, and then you go to level 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5, and then 6, or up to level 8, which never really existed because everybody in secondary school just basically said, no, we'll just turn everything into GCSE grades by the time you're 12. So there was this level system, so you had a sense of progression, and that's why it was introduced. And if you look at the system which we have now, particularly in primary school, you've got children who are working at or working towards or exceeding. and they don't really know what they're working at or towards or exceeding, and there's never any sense of progression. You know, if you're a working at kid in year 1, you're probably still there in year 5, and that's, you know, that eventually is demoralizing. And the idea of the levels was for it not to be demoralizing. You could see, you know, even if I'm not going as fast as everybody else, at least I'm moving forward. And whilst there are all kinds of issues with that, it started off with the best of intentions, but then, as you say often, Jamie, it just got turned to this sort of data monster, and people started making stuff up. It didn't make any sense at all.
I've come to the conclusion that progress measures break assessment.
Yeah.
So if you want to use some data to measure progress, then you're going to do bad things with it, and you're going to do some crazy stuff with it. You're basically, here's the thing: you want to turn a human opinion into a number.
Yeah.
And then at some other point, you want to turn a human opinion into a number, and then you want to subtract the first from the second number, and then that equals the amount of progress that children have made. The whole thing is just riddled with error and subjectivity, and well, just and making also stuff up, basically.
Classic thing where people who don't really understand these things then confuse population statistics and statistics about populations, which are quite interesting. And if you gather loads of information about a population, even if you get a decent sample of that population, you can say things broadly about a population. But then to say that then you can say things about individuals, you know, any outcome is reasonable for an individual. You know, what an individual does, you know, there's all kinds of things. You know, there's no expected progress for an individual. You know, across the population, there might be expected population from somebody who starts at a particular point, but that doesn't make sense for an individual, because individuals are individuals. And that's where the whole system got crazy, where we had these, you know, some of the statistics were useful at a population level, but they really didn't make sense at an individual, at a class, or even at a school level. And people
even
would
at the population level, it's isn't it the case that it's just sort of comparing your position compared to everyone else, and so you're saying, you know, I used to be in the lowest bottom half and I'm in the top half, and so not everyone can make progress because it's sort of ranking. I mean, you explain
it's a zero-sum game if you're doing, you know, because of the way it works. Yeah.
There's so many interesting things, like just in your recent episode of your podcast, which was a recording of a webinar I did for governors, so many like nuggets in there. One of the things that I was interested in there that I didn't know actually was that there's a new assessment was done for the beginning of reception. Is that right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you said, and it sounded a bit shadowy, because then you said it's been locked away and you won't ever see it. And then in a few years, and then in 7 years time, that will be used to compare progress from the beginning of reception to the end of year 6.
Yeah.
What's your view of that? Is that what is that assessment which has value at the beginning there that can be compared meaningfully at the end? Is that something you think is sensible? How does that work?
My view on it is that on paper it makes sense, because at the moment primary progress, so secondary is really interesting. We can moan about progress 8, and there are many problems with progress 8. I understand that, but at least you're measuring progress using a standardized test at one end to a standardized test at the other. Bear in mind that the progress 8 baseline just uses reading and math scores from Key Stage 2 tests. It doesn't use writing teacher assessment. You know, it doesn't use any form of teacher. It's just, we're not using the teacher assessment. They use the teacher assessment in primary. I mean, that's a massive problem in primary. The majority of the accountability system is reliant on teacher assessment, and that becomes skewed. So it makes sense. We can measure it from Key Stage 1 to Key Stage 2 at the moment, which is from the end of year 2 to the end of year 6. So of course they want to measure it from the earliest point they can. They want to measure the kind of the progress across the expanse of primary, the primary phase. But the problem is they're 4 years old. So they're tiny little people. I remember a head teacher saying, because, well, you work it out, saying, oh, well, it's okay. We'll do it on a Friday after lunch and we'll dim the lights. you want the lowest scores you can get, and 4-year-olds are going to be well asleep by then, you know. So you want the lowest scores you can get. Now, they don't know the scores. They can't work out the scores. The tasks in the assessment are weighted. So schools are trying to work them out and say, you can't work them out because you don't know the weighting. You know, they're going to lock those away. And then in 7 years, maybe they'll say, hey, these are the scores that those children got. So, yeah, I think I understand why they want to do it, but I just don't know if it's going to work.
I think I'm really looking forward to seeing the results from it, because I think it'll be interesting to see how this works out. Again, I've had a good look at this and I've written various pieces about it. My view is that it's better to if you're going to produce these numbers, and these are numbers for politicians basically, if you're going to produce some kind of progressy number, this value added number, going from when the children are 6, 7 through to when they're 11, 10, 11 didn't really make much sense, as James said. So you bring it back and you say, okay, let's do it at the earliest we get them in, when it's non-statutory. The children don't actually have to be in school then. But anyway, whatever, we'll test them then when they first start to school. So literally, hello, come in, do this assessment. And it's a relatively simple, relatively quick 20 minutes assessment. You do that at the beginning of reception. And then we'll compare that to some numbers which we create in year 6. But I say it's a 7-year measure. When I looked into it, it was useful to see the average length of time that a head teacher spends in post in primary school. It's about 7 years. So any head teacher, might, you probably weren't responsible for these children when they were in reception. You moved on, so you could probably explain what's happened. Or you can come up with some kind of story. So I think, on balance, I'm relatively happy with the way they've changed the accountability system for primary, because I think it's a number for politicians, and I suspect it will be somewhat meaningless when they actually use them. Anyway, but it is an interesting thing, Tom, that they've gone back to say, okay, let's try and do this. Because my view then is, well, if you're going to do that at the beginning, why don't you just do a similar kind of thing at the end? Just do a 20-minute assessment of children who are 10. Yeah. Give them an iPad, ask them some questions to generate a number, and then use those two for your progress measure, and let primary schools actually focus on transitioning year 6 children properly. Whereas at the moment, we have this ludicrous situation where primary schools in England are, they're forced into a position where they have to maximize maths and reading results.
I mean, do you think, Emma, have you seen these tests? What do they actually have to do?
I don't know. I was just distracted by wanting to give Richard a massive round of applause there. Yes.
This transition between year 6 and year 7 is, again, you look at it, you just think, it's such a missed opportunity, on so many levels. Absolutely. And it's missed because of all this time that's being spent on the assessments that have been put in place for year 6.
It's such a golden year as well, that year. It's such a beautiful opportunity, and it's just missed. And anyway, Tom, you was have I seen them? I have seen the administration of them. And I mean, I take the point that they're standardized and they're notionally quick. It doesn't feel quick when you're the EYFS teacher and you've got potentially 45 or 60 children in the unit that you're working in, and 20 minutes multiplied by that is quite a lot of hours when you're trying to settle the rest of the class. But I get it, and it, like you say, it does make sense to sort of measure at the beginning and measure at the end. But it does seem odd that somebody somewhere knows the weighting of this, but nobody in education seems to know it. It's like someone knows what the secret code is.
I also think, Emma, that it's really important that, again, it's really important that schools don't know it, so that they can completely ignore it. Because again, there have been various calls within primary education. People say, but can we not find some information out? You honestly, you don't want to know anything about it at all. You just focus on teaching the children in front of you. Stop worrying about the measures.
And that brings me on to the other thing I was going to say is that brings me on to that bit that you talk about a lot, about the fact that when the data gets skewed, when it gets used for something else.
Yeah.
So it's that whole bit about when it becomes a measure of the teacher's performance rather than the overall progress of the children. So
you can have high quality data, or you can use it for performance management and accountability. It's up to you, I think. It's my take on this. You can have accurate information, or you can just accept it's going to get bent out of shape. No, the reception baseline is a really interesting one. One of the things that has been missed, and I've really tried to get people sort of thinking about this, is that the infant junior school thing was so complicated. They gave in the primary assessment consultation in 2017, they gave a couple of options to keep Key Stage 1 in place for infant schools alone, to measure progress from the reception baseline to Key Stage 1 for infant schools, and continue measuring progress from Key Stage 1 to the Key Stage 2 in the junior schools. None of those are particularly popular. So when the response to the consultation came back, they basically said, okay, well, we've answered all these other questions. We haven't got an answer to this infant junior question, so just leave it with us. 4 months later, this press statement thing came out and said, oh, we've sussed it, we've got an answer for you on the whole reception baseline progress. Oh, right, what's your answer? What are you going to go? We're going to do nothing. Oh, what? So infant, first, middle, junior schools will not be included in that part of the accountability. So only an all through primary school will have a progress measure from reception baseline to key stage 2. These other types of schools, they say, I'm quoting now, other types of primary schools will have a responsibility for evidencing progress to Ofsted using their own assessment information. So that's nearly 3,000 schools. That's wow. That's nearly 20%. It's like 15-20% of primary schools. You're just saying it's too complicated, we won't bother. But the rest of you, yeah. But no, I can't deal with that. So we won't. So why not all schools? Why can't all primary schools, if it's okay for them, why can't all primary schools be responsible for evidencing progress to Ofsted using their own assessment information?
It's so weird. It's like, I remember when it was to do with levels of progress. I mean, it used to drive me mad because, I mean, I have an absolute, I mean, you must meet this all the time. There are people who are sort of data illiterate and they sort of use percentages, even though they're, 100 is more than the number of children. And they'll talk about percentages of increase. When you say, can you just stop back from it? You realize that's actually fewer than a whole person. And you're comparing less than a whole person here compared with 2.5 people over here in a different cohort. And the number, the percentages are there to serve some function, but when the numbers are out of something like 30.
That's every primary school, pretty much.
Exactly. Have a word with yourselves about the limits of what you're saying here. But that type of thing, when it was levels of progress, I mean, I used to describe it as something like, jumping from one fuzzy cloud of uncertainty to another fuzzy cloud and measuring it with something which also was fuzzy and then sort of putting loads of pressure on that to be better. And it's this thing of, and this is, I really like this thing you did with for governors, because as governors, I mean, it's pretty stressful. They have this sense of duty, and I need to be. Now you have this. I'm going to ask you to say it because I'm going to get it wrong. You have this brilliant phrase which you use several times in the podcast about data minimalism and what it means that governors should interpret. It's about whole accountability. And what do you say? It's really neatly said.
Oh, I don't know what the phrase was.
What's the phrase, Richard? You say it a few times. The data minimalism.
Again, off the top of my head, I'm trying to think. Yeah, we talk about data minimalism. Exactly, and we talk about the fact that you want to get to the point where you are collecting high quality data, and that you're doing that efficiently and effectively, so that you can focus on the other things which you need to do. Again, and I say that too often people end up collecting a lot of very low quality data. It's kind of like a maximalist approach, and again, one of my favorite expressions, I talk about fuzzy data because the numbers are fuzzy. If you're trying to measure a child, you're trying to measure people, it's always fuzzy. It's not like there's an accurate gauge that you can use, that you can't put them on a scale and say, yes, your education level is 6.3. It doesn't work like that, so you can't do that. So data is a bit fuzzy. And then the other thing is, my favorite phrase is a phrase by a physicist called Wolfgang Pauli, which is that it's not even wrong, which is not only is your interpretation or the question you're asking is not right, it's not even wrong. Just what you think that means. It's like when people said, "Oh, this child is a 3B child or a 5A child," and when you'd say to them, "What do you mean?" and it would just, you didn't even want to have that conversation because they have the whole assumption that was.
Do you know my favorite example of? I mean, I could. My favorite example of data BS was this. I felt sorry for the guy. He was a teacher of technology, responsible for technology at a school I used to work in, and he showed me his level descriptors for like year 7, and he said, well, what we get them to make this box, and if it's sanded and smooth on at least one side, it's a 3C. If it's on 2 sides, it's a 3B. And if they manage to do all 4 sides, it's a 3A. It's like, he said, I don't know what else. He said, I didn't know what else to put. So that's what I put. It's like, as ludicrous as that. Like, you have to have some steps. So he'd made up this nonsense. But that's what the system was forcing people to do, to sort of lose the plot. Now, you have this. I wanted to explore this because a brilliant thing, I thought this was really like wise, was when you're talking about kids with special needs and subgroups, is to not even look at the numbers and the percentages, but look at who the people are.
Yes.
and what you're doing for them. So does the data get you to identify it's Jennifer and James and Mohammed in year 4, and this is the issues they've got, and that humanizing the information. I thought, well, why does that sound so radical? But it felt like a breath of fresh air to me. So Jamie, tell us a bit more about that, because that sounded like a really sensible approach.
So this sort of data minimalism thing sort of comes from the dark days of Raise, and I think we talked about that on that, and Rich and I talked about this a lot. Raise Online at its worst was 103 pages long, and it was a horrendous document. And I used to do governor training, and it was just some of the worst experiences of my life of been trying to train governors on, and it's not the governor's fault. You know, you've got this 103-page document. At one point, they put a G on all the pages they thought were useful for governors. There's basically a G on every single page. And then it went on a bit of a diet, and they got it down to about 63 pages. And then the IDSR came out, and it's 22 pages, and then it was 11 pages, and then it was 7 pages. And the latest version of the IDSR is about, what, 5-6 pages long? Thinking, this is it. This is perfect. Governors need some kind of overview of school standards, and the IDSR kind of does it. And what I like about the IDSR is not much data in it. It's just sentences. Your school's progress is significantly below average. I know Richard's cringing at that. Significantly below average and in the bottom 20% nationally, you know, but at least it's unambiguous. It's like, here is a sentence. This is what we think. So we're not presenting you tables and tables and tables of numbers, which you then think, well, I've got my conclusion and you've got your conclusion, and you've got 10 different people looking at this table and they've all got a different conclusion. It's basically, this is what Ofsted think. It's in a sentence. You read the sentence, you know what they think. And it's very, very short. The group thing, we referred, I think, possibly to a speech that Amanda Spielman gave in 2018, where she talked about nor do I think there is merit, I've almost rehearsed this now, nor do I think there is merit in analysing every subgroup of pupils at school level. At national level, you can do it because you've got the numbers. You've got hundreds of thousands of children. So you know, they're going to want to measure the disadvantage gap. I understand that, the gap between most disadvantaged children and others, and they're looking at the pupil premium and the effectiveness of that and this, that, and the other, and they want to see if that gap closing over time. And of course, we've seen since COVID that the gap has widened again. But then she said about at school level, the numbers are just too small. I mean, you were saying, like, in an average primary, there's 30 children. It's a one form-entry school. They're worth 3% each. And then when you break it down into boys and girls, we're now talking about each child is worth 7-8% each. And then you've got 5 disadvantaged children. They're 20% each. And this is crazy stuff. Like, trying to analyze those groups. They're not groups. They're not meaningful in any way. So my point, like, governors need the IDSR. They need something that shows the percentages achieving expected standards at the end of key stages. Yeah, fine. But in terms of internal assessment data, which Ofsted no longer look at, they need something to show what proportions of children are doing what we expect them to do in reading, writing and maths this term, end of last year, whatever. So they need that broad overview. And then their question should be around, well, 75% are, so that 25% aren't. And the question that, what are we doing to support those 25% of children who aren't? And you're going to, and that's 7 children, you're probably going to have 7 different conversations. And so data is not going to give you that. Data starts you off, but then we're talking about the needs of 7 different children, and they're probably 7 different needs.
I'm just remembering conversations in my past of each child's 2.4%, each child's 3.1. It's an absolute nonsense as a year 6 teacher. But that kind of brings us that there's a bit on page 7 in your book about the 4 categories of data. Well, I think it's just the neatest description I've ever heard, the most useful description I've ever heard. So can you just expand on what those 4 categories of data are for anybody maybe starting out their data journey?
Richard, get the book, Richard. What are the 4 categories of data?
Page 7 underlined.
Yeah, no, page 7 underlined. Excellent. Good. Well, I've got page 6 exactly. What are
sorry, you're breaking up. What?
that's the real curveball there.
Page 7.
I knew I'd forgotten.
Well, the bit that's got the little cloud with the 7, and it said, so what do we want to know broadly? We can separate data into 4 categories.
You want to read it out for us?
Okay, are you sitting comfortably? I'm going to read it out for you.
Go for it.
I just know I'm going to get them wrong.
We can separate data into 4 categories: context, attainment, development, provision. And I'll let you expand on those.
I'm going to hand over to Richard because I've spoken loads.
Exactly, yeah. So this is to be clear. So previously we've been talking about statutory data, which is the government stuff where you've got to, you know, the government is collecting numbers, and I say they just want a number at the beginning and the end, and then they produce these reports for the RAIs, the IDSCRs, and all those kind of things. So that's government level stuff. So let's put that to one side. That's what they do. They tell you about your school. But from what you want to know when you're in a school, I say there's some information which you need to know, so that you start off with context, which is basically what's the situation in our school. There are some broad categories that are useful to know. So do children have identified special educational needs, for example? That's a useful bit of information for you to know. What's the age spread in a class, in a cohort, across a key stage? Because it makes a big difference. We know that there's good research to suggest that summer-born children are different in key ways to autumn-born children in terms of the ways they access the curriculum and schooling. So things like age within cohort is particularly useful. Whether children speak additional languages, whether English is an additional language for them, is a useful bit of information. Other context is medical histories for children. You know, in year 9, for example, if you find out that a child missed half of year 1 because they had some kind of medical issue, you can see that that may have affected their education in a way that you might find useful to know about. So medical histories are useful. Attendance. Some children have difficulties with attendance because of medical issues, but there could be other kinds of issues to do with family, to do with illness, to do with all kinds of things. So all that kind of context information, there should be a way of capturing that in schools, and you know, schools who do it well do capture that information and keep a track of it. And you don't need to do a lot, but you just need an indication, you know, probably once a year, to say broadly, where do we think this child is? Is there anything we need to know or not? So is that context information. You're going to have to remind me the other 3 categories. I wrote this bit, by the way. Emma, but I put it in the...
Attainment. So after context,
attainment. Yeah. So the second thing then is attainment data. In England, we have a particularly interesting situation because 15, 20 years ago, the way which people were measuring attainment was very interesting. A lot of it was teacher assessment, or it was being done through optional SATs papers which the government produced. People didn't really understand standardized tests. They're much better at it. Certainly the new generation of teachers coming into schools seem to have been trained better, so they actually understand what a standardized test is and what it may or may not be telling you. But anyway, when you're coming down to assessment, you've got 2 broad options. You either use a standardized test, which is designed to rank children. It's really key that all those test items in a standardized test are designed to find out, are you the kind of child who can answer this question correctly? Not, do you know the answer to this question? That's not what the standardized test is trying to do. It's not trying to work out what you know. It's trying to work out whether you're the kind of child who can answer that question, so that we can put you into an order. So we can broadly say you're in the middle, you're down here, you're up here. That's what standardized tests do. That's really useful information. However, standardized tests are difficult to create for a lot of subjects, and in primary schools certainly. They're useful ones in maths and in reading, less so elsewhere. There are other ways of getting standardized information in writing. You can use comparative judgment for those people interested. In secondary, it's a similar kind of issue. It's difficult to get a decent standardized assessment in anything other than really maths and reading. But there are a few other things that you can do. And so you've got that, but then you've also got teacher assessment. Teacher assessment, it's impossible to teach in England without assessing the pupils. The problem with teacher assessment is you're probably wrong in ways that you don't really know. You know, it's fine to be wrong. Accept the uncertainty. You're probably wrong. This is what I think, but I'm probably wrong somewhere. I don't know where I'm wrong. I'll have a look at the standardized assessments that I've got to see if that helps me. I'll look at the children's work. I'll talk to the people who work with the children and see whether we're trying not to be wrong, but we're probably wrong somewhere. That's one of the issues with teacher assessment. It's also massively time inefficient, particularly because you end up, as you were saying, Tom, you end up writing these criteria that just takes far too long to produce something which isn't often terribly helpful. So assessment data, it's really crucial that you think about what you're generating and what you're going to then collate. You know, what you're actually going to put into some kind of system and keep. So because then and what you can then analyze that data. So assessment data is a tricky one.
What are the other two? What are the other two?
The next one is the one. There's the phrase that I absolutely love that you use. You don't talk about progress, do you? You talk about development.
Yeah, and that's a deliberate thing again, and we talk about this in the book, because the problem with the word progress in the English context is, as you all know, but again, for those people watching and listening, we now have two very different interpretations of progress. So what we used to have was measures of expected progress, and that's the whole numerical thing that we just talked about with the statutory data. That's a very government-led thing. They want a number because politicians like numbers for various reasons. So this idea of expected progress was measure A, measure B, what's the difference? That represents progress of some kind. So we had this, even though Jamie, you can tell us, when was expected progress removed as a DFE measure? Because they took it away, didn't they?
It was removed in 2015. That was the last year of the levels measure. And in fact, there was an update to the Ofsted handbook, which removed the words expected progress from the handbook. And it said expected progress was a DFE measure, a government measure until 2015. Ofsted inspectors must not use this phrase when referring to the progress of current pupils.
Wow, I wish I'd known that.
I love that. I wrote a blog called Arm Yourself, where I just basically, you know, sometimes you labor over a blog post for weeks and you write this thing and no one reads it. And then I go and just copy and paste a load of peachy quotes from various things and everyone goes mad for it and it gets read 10,000 times. It's what? It's just a copy and paste job. Oh, well, but that was one of them that people really jumped on. You think that's really interesting. But Ofsted had basically banned inspectors from using the phrase expected progress because, well, what is it?
Yeah.
In a world without, but even with levels, it was mad because you were saying like going from a level 2 to a level 4 is the same as going from a level 1 to a level 3 is the same as going from a level 3 to a level 5, and or going from W working towards to a level 2. Well, W incorporated the entire P scale system. You know, you could be, it's madness. So development means more sort of just, is that a measure, or is that an evaluation? Is that in your view? What is that something teachers, is that like a comment, development? What do you mean by that in your types of data?
So in terms of development, then I think hopefully you can hear me saying all this. My internet connection is a bit unstable, but so the one idea of progress is this numerical progress, but the other idea of progress is the one that Ofsted now use and have used in the current framework in England, which is that pupils know more and can do more. So they now think about progress in a very different way, which is basically, you know, if you've sorted out a curriculum and the pupils are following the curriculum, they should progress. So because of these two different versions of progress, we in the book decided to, let's not talk about progress, let's talk about development. How do children develop as they move through school? Are they, you know, learning the things which we want them to learn? Are they, again, a few other things we should talk about, are they in school, in class, focused and learning? Because those are the things which you need to think about in terms of your data strategy. We need information to know, are children actually in school? Are they actually in class? If they're in class, are they actually trying to learn something? And finally, are they actually learning the things we want them to learn? So that's a different thing. So when you think about development, you need to track that. And the thing which Jamie and I have made a big thing about is that we need to move away from taking individual snapshots of pupils and only ever thinking about the current snapshot and the last snapshot, to developing a broader, rounder picture of pupils where you've got lots of little snapshots. And all of those then build a picture. As I often say, it's ludicrous that you've got a child in year 5 and you seem to know more about the child in year 5 than you know about a child in year 1. Or you've got a child in year 10 and you don't really know any more about that child than you knew about your year 7s. You should know a lot more about your year 9s, your year 10s. You've had them for a great deal of time, and you should have built a picture.
I sort of like when I talk to leadership teams about this and just say, you know, sometimes, I mean, there are lots of analogies for this, sort of sledgehammer to crack a nut or something, but who are the students you're concerned about and why? You know, how do you know that you're concerned about them? And they'll have reason, and it will be because of all these assessments that you've done. So if your assessment system doesn't even help you do that better than you could just do it because you just have this sense, this knowledge, then what's it for? You know, and then the answer is, and now I've identified them, what am I going to do about them? If you don't even know what to do about them, why even trying to identify them? So they're starting with, where we've identified some students, these are some tools we have. I mean, do you find that, Jamie, that kind of?
Well, I spent when you were just talking about that and about assessment systems or assessment databases. I don't like the phrase tracking system particularly. I think the assessment database is a good adequate description. But your tweet from years ago now, Tom, the oops, you've accidentally deleted your entire assessment database. You use the database. How long before that has an impact on it? And I've used that in so many talks. As you introduce it as a thought experiment. And absolutely, if the answer is, well, all it's going to do is just going to annoy my LA advisor or whoever, then that's not a reason to keep that system. You may as well just get rid of it. Just don't have one. It should be doing something useful. And this does mean that senior leaders, teachers, everyone in a school needs to have a really honest conversation about the current system. But there is a bit of Stockholm syndrome, you know, you're embedded in it, you're entrenched in these ways of working that you've always done, and you've never stopped to question whether it works or it doesn't work, whether it's telling you anything of any value or not. And I think when you really stop and think about it, you go, yeah, there are loads of things that schools do. We don't have time to talk about them now, but there are loads of things that schools do that they could just stop doing. And the sky is not going to fall in. In fact, what it's going to do is it's going to give teachers more time to do more useful things.
Yeah, oh, but amen to that. I mean, it pains me. I still think of a school I went to see about 5 years ago where they presented me this fat wad of stuff they produced every every half term, and I just want, it'll take you two terms to digest everything you put in there, and it was just too much. And then anyway, I mean, I actually think that you're right on the money with this stuff. So just we're going to have to wrap up soon, but just give people a bit of a flavour of because you've got this podcast, you brought out this book this year. Where do you, what's your sort of next sort of thing? How can people find you and find out more about these ideas?
Well, I continue to blog. I have my blog, but I am I now work for a software. Sorry. Tell people what's your blog? It's sigplus.co.uk, and you can find it via my Twitter bio. But I work for Insight now, which is a provider of a very popular assessment database tracking system for primary schools. About 2,500 schools using that system. I am their director of strategy. That's my official title now. And they're a great bunch to work for. And what I really like this. I'm not going to advertise it, but I really like the system. But I do joke about this, that the best thing about Insight is that it's highly customizable. You can make it do whatever you like. The worst thing about Insight is it's highly customizable and you can make it do whatever you like. Schools do crazy things, and I try to get schools to stop doing crazy things. Go, do this, don't do that. Don't collect all that. Don't have those great big long lists of learning objectives that you get teachers to tick off for hours and hours and hours. Don't do that. Just store a teacher assessment, just store your standardized tests. You don't really need much for the vast majority of children. It's those children who are struggling that you need to know more about. They're the ones that you need more information, need more data on.
So that's brilliant. I mean, I know you're right. I mean, so people need that guidance, but I mean, but it's good that it can be customized, but then you need that guidance. And what about you, Richard? What's your,
so I do a number of things, but in terms of, what I would suggest is obviously the mighty Data Proof Your School, which is a how-to now summary. And again, if in that, it's got lots of just guidance for this is what you should do. I also work with MATs and schools and various people to help them to develop strategy. So that's quite a lot of my day-to-day work is just working data strategy, because these things do take time. So I do that. The one thing which I think, and Jamie and I talk about this a lot, because data was a big fixation in English schools in the 2010s, it's much less so now. Because schools are focusing on curriculum and other things, because of the way which things have changed. And it does mean that in a lot of ways, schools are not focusing too much on data, but we think that everything that we put in Data Proof Your School is a good place for you to start to think about how you might want to think about using data. I also do some work for an organisation called Driver Youth Trust, who are a charity working on inclusion for literacy. And actually, the work that I've done supporting children in schools developing support for children with special educational needs, particularly access to reading and writing. The more that I've done that, the more that I've come to the conclusion, you need to track children's development. You need good quality data. You need to work out which of the pupils, I say, are in school, in class, focused learning. You need to work out which of those pupils need some change. You need to make some changes. And they're the pupils who often struggle to access your curriculum. And that's what your database and your data you're collecting, the information you're collecting, should allow you to work out within our school, who do we need to make provision for? Where do we need to make changes for a class or a cohort? And so kind of linking those things together. In terms of my work these days, I say I have a blog called Data Busting for Schools, which is kind of, lots of stuff about data. I used to write anonymously many years ago, as you know, Tom. I wrote as Jack Marwood, and then before that I was just icing on the cake. I wrote a blog called the Icing on the Cake Education blog, because my view is that schools are the icing on the cake. There's a big cake. Anyway, you can go back and look at those blogs. Some of them are quite ranty and quite angry, but they're still there because
they warned me about
there are
you.
still things that, yeah, exactly. There are still things that you wonder about. What, it's that whole purpose of education. And is education a profession? There's all kinds of questions around all these things. But I find what we do in education fascinating. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, you need to think about what are you actually doing to help the pupils who are not finding this easy, or have had some kind of trauma, or have had some kind of problem. Because, guess what? Loads of children, English school system is great. Most children go to school and they do really well within the system. Most children are absolutely fine, but some are not, and you need to support those children. You need to work out who they are and do something about it.
And were you aware of the shady Jack Marwood years?
No, I feel like I need to go and explore this. Like you've got a alter ego.
Lots of things, exactly. Just because, again, people say and do things, but again, yes, so I've had various arguments with people about, people who think that, selection at 11 is a great idea, and you look at it and think, okay, is that really, people think all kinds of odd things. People who think that for some reason certain types of schools are better than other types of schools. The whole idea that a school is better than another school, I think, is questionable at best. You need to really interrogate what you mean by that. People blithely talk about things, and they use terms like good schools and good teachers, and you have to question, what exactly do you mean by these things, and how are you going to assess that? How are you going to measure that? And again, the more you look into it, the more you realize that there's just a lot of things that people do and say that they haven't really thought a great deal about, and they should.
In fact, in the UK this week, with the Times produces this Good Schools Guide, and it's just an appalling kind of bias fest of like, says a few measures, and it's so irritating. I mean, if your school is out there and you're one of those, well done to you, but you're not really better than all the other schools. I'm sorry. You're not.
Appalling bias fest is my new favourite phrase.
There you go. You got it.
Exactly. There's a lot of that, and there's a lot of people who say and do things about education. And again, you come down to the fact that you use the Ben Goldman phrase, I think you'll find this a little bit more complicated than that. Dylan Williams says, everything works somewhere, some things don't work anywhere. Education is a complex problem. As Becky Allen says, it's a complex system. And the idea that it's a simple thing and that you can simply solve it, I think it's just extraordinary that people think that it's simple. It's incredibly complex, and it's very, very hard to work out.
When you boil a school's performance down to a single number, like a Progress 8 number, and you think that's enough to tell you about, and then you can rank schools in order. And actually, you get one side of a threshold and you're significantly above. You get one or two children drop a grade or whatever for whatever reason, then suddenly you're not significantly above, and that could be the difference in an outstanding or a good Ofsted, or a good Ofsted and a requires improvement Ofsted. And it can even affect who wants to go to your school and house prices in and everything. That was just a couple of children, I joke about, sitting looking out of a window at the squirrels in the tree. It wasn't anything to do with school standards. It's because they were distracted by squirrels. That's why we got that progress score.
We're gonna have to. I think that's a brilliant way to end, because we're going to go out on the squirrels. But honestly, I think it's great. What I love about this is everyone's very fired up about it, and the data stuff it's really just the kind of the way to think about all of the more deeper things, and it's just the avenue in. But the way you both bring that to it is so brilliant. So I want to say massive thank you so much. So guys, rush out and get the data, proof your school. Richard Selfridge and Jamie Pembroke, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for listening to Mind the Gap, making education work across the globe. And Everyone have a fantastic new year. It's going to be awesome. 2023, here we are. See you very soon. Thank you so much.